We're here working on the 2003 Land Rover Discovery 2. We've got the fill plug out right here. This is a 13/16. Somewhat peculiar because it's plastic. There's discussion about this in the forums. A lot of people replace these. I think the idea is it's plastic so that you can't strip the metal of the actual differential housing, but it's very high quality. I mean, I've carefully inspected the threads and still in perfect shape, so I'm just going to reinstall it. The drain plug is on the bottom side, on the bottom right passenger side, and it's one of these internal drives. It's very peculiar because it is a square drive, and so I have a set of hex bits like this, but not square bits. So what I'm going to do, instead of draining it, first thing I did was check it, and I did not get, just putting my pinky in there, so it's definitely a little low. And once I got in there, it's not terrible, but it is still rather dark and somewhat thin. You can see there. So it's not bad color, but it is a little bit on the low side, and I'm going to replace it with some heavier weight. Once again, there's discussion about this. The factory says 75/90, but pretty universal agreement. Oh, this stuff smells terrible, by the way, especially if you're using a GL5, which, just as a side note, you should not use GL5 on older manual transmissions because it is very high sulfur. Whew. Whew. Smells like a batch of rotten eggs. It's awful. But it can wear down the synchronizers in older manual transmissions, but gear lube is shared between manual transes and differentials. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pump out what's in there. I've got a little vacuum pump called a topsider, and I use that to pump out liquids. If you don't want to drain them, you can suck it out. There's a number of applications that it's really useful for. So I'm going to pump out what's in there and then replace. Like I said, there's discussion about this, but there's a 75/90, but I am going to use 85/140, go higher. That seems to be the consensus, is the higher viscosity is just better, longer lasting, thicker. So yeah, so we're going to pump this out and then replace it using a hand pump to pump the new liquid in. So I'm going to show you how the topsider works. It's a very simple hand pump vacuum design. My one complaint about it was that the rubber gasket around the actual pump itself was rather low quality and kept slipping and causing leaks. So I actually used some duct tape to create a better seal, and it's been fine ever since. But basically you just have, it's a very simple device. You have this clamp here that you clamp down, and that way when you pump, it creates a vacuum inside the tank, and then you run this line into your hole. Yep. Hey buddy. Hey. I am working on the differential on the Land Rover. Not interested. So I'm going to run this down into the fill hole, and once you get enough pumps on there, it says about 30 to 40 pumps, then you release this valve and it will suck the fluid right out. So very handy device, not very expensive. I think it is maybe about 40 bucks. I'm going to go from up top here. Alright. Run that down in there. Hey Mama. Coffee. Thank you, Mama. Say hi to the camera. Alright, awesome. Well, once I get enough pumps on this, which it's got a pretty good vacuum on it now. Pull that, and there comes the stuff. Ooh, it's quite black. So once you start, it's just a matter of continuing to pump to keep the vacuum pressure on there. It also helps if you have gravity working with you instead of against you. So we'll come down here a little bit. And here comes the sludge. This is of course of much higher viscosity than engine oil, so it'll come through a little slower, but really handy device. Again, other than that one kind of annoying seal on there, it's a really great piece of basic machinery to have in your shop. So just a matter of basically vacuuming it out now, and just keep it in there, and you can see it coming out at the base over there. So just a matter of keeping the vacuum pumped every so often until you start getting a bunch of bubbles through there, and that's that. Here we're getting to the end of the differential drain. Our vacuum process working real good, and you know, you can tell when you get to the bottom because it starts making that slurping sound. One of the really cool things about having the vacuum is you get to suck up the sludge off the bottom, which, you know, won't necessarily just drain out, especially in a high viscosity oil like this. So, but that is good and dry now. Very good process. I really like the topsider for these sorts of fluid drain scenarios. Very handy thing to have. Presumably, of course, they made that square plug to keep weekend mechanics out of the differential, but it's just a little bit obnoxious. They didn't have to make it quite such a weird thing. So I'm going to use that hand pump and pump in some more fluid. I probably will put a little bit of the 7590 to start, and then fill it up with the 85140. Well, a less than great update. This pump, Thames oil pump, put it on the thing, and after about, I don't know, 10 strokes, it broke. It came completely apart. Like, holy crap, that is terrible. Luckily, we've got enough room that I'll just be able to stick the 1 quart size into the nozzle. I'm trying to drain out what was left in the tube of that horrible abortive thing. I can't believe that thing broke, and just immediately broke. Just came into pieces. Cap came off. Just came apart. Ridiculous. So we've got our front differential drained, vacuumed, and resealed. Refilled. I used the 85140 I started with the 75/90 in the 1 quart bottle because my hand pump broke almost immediately. So I started with the 75/90. It's fine to mix. I mean, it's, you know, it's a range of tolerance. It's again, it's nice to have it a little heavier than the 75/90 from what I've been reading online. So, you know, there's a lot of discussion about exactly what to put in there, but it doesn't hurt to mix them. And so then after I started filling it with the 1 liter, with the 75/90, I started putting the 85 140. I think it took, looks like it took about, let's see, this one is about half full. Yeah, just a little over half full, and that's down about, yeah, so a little over about 1.25 all together, maybe a little less than that. So it didn't take a lot. What you're looking for is when you got the plug out, the fill plug out, you keep filling it until it just starts to drizzle out. And I gave it one more good squeeze and then buttoned it up. You do want to make sure that you're on level, flat, you know, flat place, so that everything's draining and settling right. But considering how dark the differential fluid was that came out of it, this is definitely a good thing to do. And you know, again, depending on forum discussions, they say anywhere from 30 to 50,000 miles. You know, I tend to replace things on the lower side of pretty much every oil. You know, the better maintained, the longer it'll go. So, not a very difficult procedure, especially with it lifted like this. I'm not sure without the lift, but it, you know, it might be a little bit more difficult. I'm just not sure of that, but really was not a hard task to do, and definitely something that you want to do if you have one of these vehicles. I'm looking now at the rear differential on this, and you can see the remnants of some duct tape that have been surrounding this, and this is a different plug. This is, that's a metal plug, so presumably not the, you know, at some point in the ownership of this vehicle they overstripped this plug and it leaked, and so they duct taped it in there for a while until somebody came along and replaced it with a metal plug. But of course they had to make it this weird square thing. It says half SLK, I'm presuming ½ inch. So I have a special socket that has all these pins in it that will go around something, so I'm going to see if that will work, because I think it'll go up to 3/4 of an inch, and so that should take care of this peculiar bolt. So you can see here, this is that special socket I was telling you about. These came into vogue not that long ago. Nice thing is, it's perfect for this sort of an application where you need to get around some sort of a weird plug. You know, easy, so no problem on that front. Didn't have to order some sort of weird thing, weird one-time use socket, something like that. So I'm going to clean this up, get this duct tape crap off there, at least from around it, and then same procedure. So, and this, not a bad plug, but kind of gross. So, looks like it's got some Teflon tape around it to help it seal. You know, it felt like it was in there good, so I think it does have the right thread pattern. You know, it didn't feel like it was binding, because you can get the right size plug and have the wrong thread pattern. The thread pattern refers to the distance between the peaks and valleys of the threads of the screw. So, ooh, that is way low, way low. I had to get my finger, so that's way down to about there. That is way low. So, very good thing that I'm taking the time to do this, as that is that's something that you don't want to run out of fluid for sure. basic approach is the front differential. I've got my vac pump line in here. I threaded it over the suspension arm here so that it will, force it to go straight down. And same thing, you pinch it off, pump it up, and watch it flow. And there it goes. This is really muddy, really burnt looking, so definitely a very good thing that I'm changing this fluid. And this is not a hard procedure to do. If you have the right socket bit for this, then it's easier than changing your oil, really. I mean, just draining the fluid out and replacing it. These are meant to be serviced. That's one of the reasons why they're so easy to get to, and it's a very easy service procedure that you do want to do as much as you can. And while I'm under here, start spreading the love with all the oil and grease and everything. That sort of stuff just keeps your undercarriage nice and oiled up and rust-free. It's particularly important for off-road vehicles. You can check your vacuum, make sure it's still sucking good by pulling it out till you get an air bubble, and then you can stick it back in. You watch the air bubble travel, and that tells you, if you need to hop out and pump it some more. But so far it's still moving at a pretty good rate. But, very easy procedure. Again, this is just kind of jackassy that somebody put this duct tape on this poor thing. So we're gonna try to get all that off. Nasty and melted on there. The differentials don't get as hot as engines, but they do get warm. And probably just regular old duct tape. It's amazing it's still on there at all, but gross. So we'll work on stripping all that nastiness off while we're in here. Go ahead and clean up that plug too. The threads of it. Yeah. There we go. Get that nasty stuff off. Alright. Looking like our vacuum's slowing down. But pretty easy procedure. So we're all buttoned up here. Took about a quart and a half, not quite 2 quarts. Again, this was quite low, so I'm very happy that I got to this when I did. If you don't want to wear out your differential, very important and a very significant piece of machinery you don't want to replace. So, this is something that Discovery owners should do as a regular maintenance interval. Forums seem to say about 30,000 miles is what you want to do, but if you're trailing it, if you're, really off-roading it, hauling with it, that sort of stuff, using it as a heavier duty vehicle, then I would say you probably want to check it maybe every 10 or 20. You can always just check it and top it off. Easy, pop that plug out and see where you're at, and if you need to top it off, always best to have it topped off than have it go too low.